In the shadow of history lurk organizations whose influence on world events remains underestimated. Two such enigmas, the Order of the Germanen and the William Morgan affair, reveal the dark side of secret societies from different eras. In the early 20th century, Germany, ravaged by defeat in World War I, became fertile ground for occult associations. Among them rose the Order of the Germanen, a secret brotherhood that combined ancient Germanic mythology with radical racial theories. Their runic symbolism and mystical rituals later penetrated the very heart of Nazi ideology, and their search for the mythical Atlantis as the ancestral home of the Aryans foreshadowed the activities of the infamous Ahnenerbe. Across the ocean, in 19th-century America, an equally sinister story unfolded. Stonemason William Morgan, who decided to expose the secrets of Freemasonry, disappeared without a trace in 1826. This was followed by a series of strange deaths and disappearances of witnesses, giving rise to the first large-scale wave of anti-Masonic sentiment in the USA. These stories, separated by an ocean and a century, are united by one thing: the grim aura of secrecy and power capable of rewriting history. The Weimar Republic was born in the agony of defeat. After the catastrophe of the First World War, Germany plunged into chaos of political instability, economic collapse, and national humiliation. The Treaty of Versailles, perceived by many Germans as an unjust punishment, became fertile ground for the "stab in the back" theory, a myth that the German army, undefeated on the battlefield, was betrayed by internal enemies, liberals, communists, and, of course, Jews. In this atmosphere of widespread disillusionment and scapegoat hunting, dozens of nationalist organizations flourished, among which the Germanen Order occupied a special place. But the roots of this secret society went much deeper, into intellectual currents that had emerged long before the war. Guido von List's and Georg Lanz von Liebenfels' Ariosophy combined ancient Germanic mythology with racial theories, creating an esoteric doctrine of Aryan supremacy. Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy, with its concept of root races and lost civilizations, provided a convenient template for constructing an alternative history of humanity. And the Folkish movement, which romanticized the Germans' connection to their native land and ancient traditions, provided mass support for these ideas. The Germanen Order skillfully synthesized these currents, creating a doctrine that was both elitist and accessible to understanding. Members of the order conducted secret ceremonies in sacred groves, studied runes as magical symbols of power, and developed a complex cosmogony, at the center of which was the Aryan race, the bearer of divine blood and the heir to ancient wisdom. A key feature of the Germanen ideology was its claim to scientific validity. Unlike many occult groups of that time, the order sought to clothe its mystical concepts in the form of academic research. Members of the society studied ancient texts, conducted archaeological investigations, and developed linguistic theories designed to prove the superiority of the Germanic peoples. It was this pseudo-scientific methodology that later became a characteristic feature of the Ahnenerbe, the SS Research Institute that inherited many of the Germanen's ideas. Behind the secret doors of the Orden Germanen stood individuals whose names are today known only to a narrow circle of occult historians. The founder and spiritual leader of the organization was Hermann Pohl, a charismatic intellectual, a former officer of the Kaiser's army who received a classical education at Heidelberg University. Pohl combined deep knowledge of ancient Germanic languages with a fanatical belief in racial theories, which allowed him to create a unique synthesis of academic knowledge and mysticism. His closest associate was Erich von Leistner, an hereditary aristocrat interested in archaeology and possessing extensive connections among the European nobility. It was von Leistner who provided the order with financial support and access to the highest strata of society. The third in this triumvirate was Friedrich Oskar Schaeffer, a former theosophist disillusioned with the Eastern orientation of Blavatsky's teachings, who created his own system of Germanic occultism. All three had experience participating in other secret societies, from Masonic lodges to the Thule Society, which allowed them to take the best from the esoteric traditions of the time and create something fundamentally new. The structure of the Orden Germanen resembled concentric circles of power. In the outer circle were ordinary members, primarily representatives of the middle class, intelligentsia, and military, who shared nationalist views. They participated in open meetings, studying the basics of runic symbolism and racial theory. The middle circle consisted of the knowing, members who had undergone special initiation rituals and were admitted to deeper aspects of the teachings. The inner circle, or Council of the Wise, included 12 individuals who possessed the fullness of esoteric knowledge and made all key decisions. The path into the order lay through a system of complex initiations. A neophyte had to pass tests demonstrating physical endurance, intellectual abilities, and, most importantly, racial purity. Each applicant provided a detailed genealogy, proving the absence of non-Aryan blood for at least 3 generations. Initiation rituals were held on special days of solstices and equinoxes, often in places of ancient Germanic cults, sacred groves, and at megalithic structures. These ceremonies included elements borrowed from runic texts, Norse sagas, and reconstructed pagan rites. The initiate symbolically died and was reborn, receiving a new secret name and a special runic sign, which became his personal seal. The elitism of the order was maintained not only by strict selection, but also by a system of internal education. Members of the society gained access to special knowledge, from the interpretation of ancient texts to secret techniques of meditation and visualization, supposedly allowing them to awaken Aryan blood memory. The Germanen cultivated the idea of themselves as guardians of secret wisdom, accessible only to the chosen. This sense of exclusivity was reinforced by real connections with influential people, industrialists, military figures, scientists, who saw the order as an intellectual club of like-minded individuals. At the very heart of the Order of Germanen's ideology lay an ambitious task: to create a comprehensive myth of the Aryan race that would not merely explain the past but also define the future. The members of the order developed a complex cosmogonic system in which human history was presented as a struggle between higher and lower races. According to their doctrine, the original Aryans, godlike beings with blue eyes and fair hair, were direct descendants of divine ancestors, endowed with special spiritual and physical qualities. This concept was not original. Similar ideas had been expressed previously, but Germanen imbued them with pseudo-scientific rigor and systematicity. The order developed a detailed chronology of ancient Aryan civilizations, starting with the mythical Thule, a northern ancestral homeland, identified with the Hyperborea of ancient authors. According to the Germanen doctrine, after a global catastrophe, the Great Flood, the Aryans founded Atlantis, where they created a highly developed civilization. The subsequent demise of Atlantis led to the dispersal of Aryans across the world, where they became the founders of all significant ancient cultures, from Egypt to India. A particularly important place in this mythology was occupied by the ancient Germanic peoples, who, in the opinion of the Order's members, had preserved the greatest racial purity. To substantiate these theories, Germanen members turned to a wide variety of sources. They skillfully interpreted ancient Germanic epics, especially the Edda, finding in it encrypted indications of the Aryan origin of the Germanic peoples. Runes were regarded not merely as an alphabet, but as sacred symbols preserving the secret knowledge of ancestors. Archaeological finds, from swastikas on prehistoric pottery to megalithic structures, were incorporated into the overall picture of a great Aryan past. Even linguistics was pressed into service of the racial myth. Members of the Order developed a theory about the German language as a direct descendant of the original Aryan proto-language. Special attention was paid to racial psychology, a pseudo-scientific discipline supposedly proving innate differences in the intellectual and spiritual capacities of different races. Aryans were endowed with creative genius, the capacity for abstract thought, and an innate striving for justice. Other races were described as imitators, incapable of genuine creativity and higher forms of spirituality. This ideological construct had a quite practical purpose: to justify the Aryans' right to world domination and the necessity of maintaining racial purity. The Order of Germanen transformed abstract philosophical concepts into a political program, which later found reflection in Nazi doctrine. Their ideas about Lebensraum, living space, necessary for the development of the Aryan race, anticipated the geopolitical ambitions of the Third Reich. The concept of racial hygiene laid the foundation for future eugenic programs, and the mystical understanding of blood as the carrier of the racial soul became the basis for the Nuremberg laws. In their search for the lost Aryan homeland, the Germanen Order turned to one of humanity's most captivating myths, the legend of Atlantis. The perished civilization described by Plato was reinterpreted within the context of Aryan ideology and transformed into a key element of racial mythology. According to the Order's teachings, Atlantis was not merely an advanced civilization, but the cradle of the Aryan race, a place where fair-haired and blue-eyed descendants of the Hyperboreans created the greatest empire of antiquity. This empire allegedly possessed technologies far superior to modern ones and was governed by a system of priest rulers who guarded secret knowledge about the nature of the universe. The demise of Atlantis was interpreted as a result of the mixing of pure-blooded Atlantean Aryans with lower races, which led to the degradation of their innate abilities and the loss of divine protection. The ideologues of Germanen asserted that before the catastrophe, the most pure-blooded Atlanteans migrated to different parts of the world, carrying with them higher knowledge. One such group allegedly reached northern Europe, becoming the ancestors of the Germanic peoples. To confirm this theory, the Germanen Order organized several expeditions. In 1922, a group of researchers led by Erich von Leistner traveled to the Canary Islands, considered remnants of the sunken continent. They sought traces of Aryan presence among the Guanches, the indigenous population of the archipelago, who were characterized by unusually fair physical features for their geographical location. The expedition collected a collection of skulls and anthropological measurements, allegedly proving the Aryan origin of the Guanches. Another direction of research focused on Scandinavia and the Baltics. Members of the Order interpreted the megalithic structures of Northern Europe as the legacy of Atlantean Aryans. Special significance was attached to the ancient city of Veneta, legendarily swallowed by the Baltic Sea. Several underwater expeditions were sent there, financed by supporters of the Order among industrialists. Although no material evidence of Atlantis's existence was ever found, these expeditions had enormous propaganda value. They created the illusion of a scientific approach and attracted the attention of the educated public. Reports of the research were published in special editions and became subjects of discussion in intellectual circles. Particularly important for the Germanen Order was the creation of an alternative geography, an esoteric cartography of the world, where physical places were endowed with mystical meaning. They developed the concept of sacred lines and power points, allegedly connecting places of ancient Aryan settlements. This system of geomancy allowed for the interpretation of any archaeological findings as parts of a unified picture of the Aryan past. Research into Atlantis was not limited to geographical expeditions. Members of the order practiced meditative techniques and rituals aimed at awakening racial memory. They believed that genetic memory of Atlantis was preserved in the blood of Aryans, which could be activated through special practices. These recollection sessions were meticulously recorded and analyzed, creating an increasingly detailed picture of the mythical homeland. Runes are not just an ancient script, but a magical system connecting the world of humans with the world of gods. This was the belief of the members of the Order of the Germanen, who transformed these archaic symbols into a powerful ideological weapon. Each runic sign, according to their doctrine, contained a sacred power accessible only to initiates of Aryan descent. In the secret rituals of the order, runes were used as keys to awaken racial memory and establish a connection with ancient Germanic deities. Special significance was given to the Sig rune, Sowilo, symbolizing the sun and victory. Its stylized image, two lightning bolts, later became the emblem of the SS. No less important was the Hagel rune, embodying cosmic order and the harmony of opposites. The order created an entire system of runic meditation, where each symbol was linked to a specific aspect of the Aryan spirit and a special visualization technique. These practices, initially accessible only to the inner circle of the Germanen, were later adapted for the training of SS officers in Wewelsburg Castle, the spiritual center of Himmler's Black Order. The transformation of runes from archaeological artifacts into symbols of power occurred gradually. First, Hermann Wirth and his associates engaged in correcting the errors of academic science, offering their own mystically colored interpretations of runic inscriptions. Then they developed a theory of runes as a secret code containing information about the origin and destiny of the Aryan race. Finally, runes came to be seen as instruments of magical influence on reality, a kind of power generators capable of changing collective consciousness and the course of history. This last aspect particularly interested Nazi leaders who sought effective means of manipulating the masses. Of the many runic symbols studied by the Order of the Germanen, only some entered the official symbolism of the Third Reich. The Tyr rune became the emblem of the SA stormtroopers and the symbol of the military academy. The double Sig rune, as already mentioned, became the sign of the SS. The Othala rune, symbolizing ancestral heritage and blood ties to ancestors, was used in the emblem of the SS Race and Settlement Main Office. And the swastika, the ancient solar symbol, interpreted by the order as a sign of the eternal movement of the Aryan spirit, became the main symbol of Nazi Germany. The process of sacralization of runes reached its peak in the 1940s, when special courses in runic symbolism were introduced in SS schools in Bad Tolz and other elite training centers. Officers studied not only the meaning of the symbols, but also their correct drawing, the pronunciation of accompanying mantras, and even special body postures that enhanced the effect of the runes. Runic symbols were applied to weapons and personal belongings, used in the decoration of ceremonial halls, and included in initiation rituals. Thus, ancient signs extracted from archaeological excavations became instruments of power and control, consecrating the darkest pages of European history. In the early 1920s, as the Weimar Republic faced its most severe crisis, the Germanic Order began methodically expanding its influence beyond esoteric circles. Key members of the order established contacts with the nascent National Socialist German Workers' Party, seeing in it a potential instrument for realizing their ideas. This process was not accidental. It represented a carefully planned strategy of penetration into political structures. The first bridge between the secret society and the future rulers of Germany was Dietrich Eckart, a poet, playwright, and one of Adolf Hitler's early mentors. Eckart, though not formally a member of the Germanic Order, was intimately familiar with its teachings through the Thule Society, with which he maintained close contacts. It was he who introduced the young Hitler to the concept of the Aryan myth, as interpreted by the Germanen. In his conversations with the future Führer, Eckart conveyed esoteric ideas in a simplified, accessible form, adapting complex occult concepts for political use. Another important figure in this process was Rudolf von Sebottendorf, founder of the Thule Society and a secret member of the inner circle of the Germanen. He provided financial support to the early NSDAP and gave the party access to his extensive network of contacts among industrialists and military personnel. Thanks to his efforts, many former officers who shared the occult views of the order joined the ranks of the SA stormtroopers. The Germanic Order had its most significant influence on the formation of the SS ideology. Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, was never a member of the order, but he had a deep interest in occultism and ancient Germanic mythology. Through his closest advisor, Karl Maria Willigut, a former member of the Germanen, Himmler adapted many rituals and symbols of the order for use in the SS. Wewelsburg Castle, transformed by Himmler into a mystical center of the SS, was designed in accordance with the esoteric principles developed within the Germanic Order. The mechanism of the order's influence on Nazi ideology was multi-layered. At the upper level, there was direct consultation with key figures of the regime on matters of symbolism, rituals, and historical justifications for racial theory. At the middle level, personnel training was carried out. Many SS officers underwent special courses taught by former members of the order. At the lower level, simplified versions of the Aryan myth were mass distributed through propaganda, education, and cultural events. By 1933, when the Nazis came to power, the Germanic Order as a formal organization had already ceased to exist, dissolving into the structures of the new regime. However, its ideas continued to live on, transforming into state ideology. Esoteric concepts developed in the secret meetings of the order were now proclaimed from rostrums and embodied in state policy. The secret became manifest, but retained its mystical essence, transforming into the new political religion of the Third Reich. The transformation of the Germanen Order into the Ahnenerbe Research Society became one of the key processes in the institutionalization of occult research in the Third Reich. If the Germanen Order operated as a secret society, relying on mystical authority and esoteric practices, the Ahnenerbe represented an official scientific organization with state funding and academic status. This transition from clandestine to official symbolized the legitimization of racial myths and their integration into state ideology. Founded in 1935 by Heinrich Himmler, Hermann Wirth, and Richard Walter Darré, the Ahnenerbe, literally ancestral heritage, inherited from the Germanen Order not only a conceptual framework, but also specific research directions. The search for Atlantis, initiated by Germanen Order expeditions, gained new momentum in the form of large-scale archaeological explorations in Scandinavia, Iceland, and Tibet. The study of runes, once a secret practice of the order, transformed into an official discipline with university departments and specialized research divisions. Many members of the Germanen Order seamlessly transitioned into Ahnenerbe structures, occupying key positions there. Wolfram Sievers, who became the general secretary of the Ahnenerbe, had previously been associated with the outer circle of the Germanen Order and shared its ideology. Friedrich Hielscher, one of the leading ideologists of the Germanen Order, became a consultant for several Ahnenerbe research departments while maintaining a critical stance on some aspects of the Nazi regime. The research methodology also demonstrated continuity. Both the Germanen Order and the Ahnenerbe practiced a synthesis of scientific and occult methods, creating an appearance of academic rigor while interpreting data through the prism of predetermined racial theories. Both societies actively used linguistics, archaeology, anthropology, and folklore to confirm the Aryan myth. However, there were also significant differences. The Ahnenerbe, possessing state resources, could conduct research on an incomparably larger scale. While Germanen Order expeditions were limited to Europe, the Ahnenerbe organized multi-year expeditions to Tibet, South America, and the Middle East. The nature of the research also changed. If the Germanen Order focused on esoteric aspects, the Ahnenerbe paid more attention to the practical application of ancient knowledge, from medicine to military technologies. This transformation reflected the general process of rationalization of Nazi ideology, its adaptation to the requirements of state administration and military objectives. In the secret halls of the Germanen Order, not only theories and concepts were born, but also special mystical practices that later transformed into the ceremonial rituals of the Third Reich. The Order's rituals were a unique synthesis of ancient Germanic traditions, reconstructed paganism, and contemporary occultism, clothed in pseudo-scientific form. Seasonal ceremonies, timed to the solstices and equinoxes, held a central place in these practices. On the night of the summer solstice, members of the order gathered in sacred groves, where they lit tall bonfires made from 9 types of trees, symbolizing the 9 worlds of Germanic cosmology. Participants in the ritual, dressed in white robes with runic embroideries, formed a sun wheel and performed ancient chants in a reconstructed Proto-Germanic language. These ceremonies were later adapted by the Nazi regime for mass events, such as the annual party rallies in Nuremberg, where huge torchlight processions and symbolic bonfires created an atmosphere of mystical unity of the nation with the leader. Blood played a special role in the order's practices as a carrier of racial memory and spiritual essence. Rituals of brotherhood included the symbolic mixing of participants' blood in a silver chalice with runic engravings. This rite, originally having an esoteric meaning, was later transformed into the ideology of blood and soil, and found reflection in the Nuremberg laws. The spiritual practices of the Germanen also included meditative techniques aimed at awakening Aryan intuition and establishing a connection with ancestors. Members of the order practiced a special form of visualization, where the meditator imagined himself inside a runic symbol, gradually dissolving his individual consciousness into the collective racial memory. These techniques were later used in training programs for SS officers, especially in the Wewelsburg Castle School. One of the most influential rituals of the order was the initiation ceremony, which included the symbolic death and rebirth of the neophyte. The candidate spent the night in an underground crypt, where he was to experience a meeting with ancestors and receive secret knowledge from them. In the morning, he emerged into the light through special gates of rebirth, where he received a new secret name and a personal runic seal. This ritual was adopted almost without change by Heinrich Himmler for the initiation of high-ranking SS officers. The mystical practices of the Germanen Order had a profound influence on the formation of Nazi rituals. They created a special psychological mechanism that allowed rationally thinking people to accept irrational ideas of racial superiority and mystical chosenness. Through rituals, abstract concepts gained emotional power and became part of personal experience. The symbolic meaning of these practices was multi-layered. On a superficial level, they created a sense of belonging to an elite brotherhood united by secret knowledge. Deeper lay the formation of a new identity based on a mythologized past and an apocalyptic vision of the future. At the deepest level, these rituals transformed the ethical norms of the participants, replacing traditional morality with the higher law of the race. By the early 1930s, the Germanen Order had formally ceased to exist. The official version stated that the organization had disbanded itself after the Nazis came to power, having fulfilled its historical mission. Reality, as always, proved more complex. The order did not disappear, it transformed, dissolving into the structures of the new regime like drops of mercury, which, scattering, retain their essence. Many members of the Germanen's inner circle occupied key positions in the ideological apparatus of the Third Reich. Some joined the leadership of the Ahnenerbe, others became advisors to the highest party leadership, and still others headed special SS departments dealing with issues of racial policy. This invisible network of initiates continued to coordinate its actions, steering the development of Nazi ideology into the channel of the order's esoteric concepts. It is telling that the ceremony of the Germanen's official dissolution took place in an ancient castle in Bavaria, where 12 members of the inner circle performed the last ritual, symbolically passing the quote, "zero" to new guardians. The very next day, 7 of them received appointments to state positions. The ideas of the Germanen Order did not merely enter the official ideology of Nazism, they formed its esoteric foundation. The racial doctrine, geopolitical concepts of, quote, "one, the cult of Nordic blood and soil," all of this grew out of the order's secret doctrines, only slightly adapted for mass perception. Even the architecture of the Third Reich, with its monumentality and special attention to symbolism, reflected the aesthetic principles developed by Germanen theorists. The continuity is particularly evident in the structure of the SS, created by Heinrich Himmler as a modern embodiment of an ancient knightly order. Hierarchy, initiation rituals, esoteric symbolism, the cult of ancestors. All these elements were directly borrowed from Germanen practices. Wewelsburg Castle, transformed by Himmler into the mystical center of the SS, became a temple of the new religion of blood, where ceremonies developed in the order's secret gatherings were conducted. In its Obergruppenführer Hall, 12 high-ranking SS officers, sitting at a round table like Knights of the Grail, underwent spiritual practices designed to awaken Aryan memory within them. Thus, a secret society, formally ceasing to exist, continued to live within the totalitarian state, guiding it along a path traced by the esoteric symbols of ancient runes. In 1826, The quiet town of Batavia, New York, became the epicenter of a scandal that rocked all of America. At the heart of this story was William Morgan, a man whose fate forever changed Americans' attitudes towards Freemasonry. Who was this man who dared to challenge one of the most powerful secret societies of his time? William Morgan was born in Virginia in 1774. Little is known about his early years. He worked as a stonemason, then served in the army, participating in the War of 1812. By the mid-1820s, Morgan had settled in western New York State, where he tried to establish his own business. He was married to Lucinda Pendleton, who was significantly younger than him and had 2 children. Contemporaries described Morgan as an educated and ambitious man, with a difficult character and a penchant for adventures. America at that time was undergoing a period of profound social change. After the War of Independence and the War of 1812, the young republic was searching for its identity. This was the period of the so-called "Zero," a religious revival accompanied by a rise in the popularity of evangelical churches. In parallel, the influence of Masonic lodges grew, which by that time united many influential Americans, from George Washington to local judges and sheriffs. Freemasonry, with its secret rituals and oaths, aroused suspicion among religious Americans. Many saw in it a threat to the democratic values of the young republic. In this atmosphere of nascent anti-Masonic sentiment, William Morgan, by his own account, became a Freemason and attained a high degree of initiation. However, in 1825, a conflict occurred. Morgan was denied membership in a new Masonic lodge in the town of Leroy. The reasons for this refusal remain a subject of debate. Some historians believe that Masons doubted the legitimacy of his initiation, while others think that personal conflicts or financial disagreements were the cause. Offended by the refusal, Morgan decided to strike back. He announced his intention to publish a book revealing the secrets of Masonic rituals and oaths. For this, he entered into an agreement with local publisher David Miller, who also had reasons to dislike Masons. News of the impending publication quickly spread among Masons in the region and caused real panic. Emergency meetings were held in Masonic lodges to discuss countermeasures. Persecution of Morgan began, first through legal mechanisms. He was arrested on charges of petty theft, but the court acquitted him. Then followed an arrest for an allegedly unpaid debt of $2.68. Morgan spent several days in prison, after which he was released on bail. But the pressure did not cease. Morgan and his family were threatened. His house was set on fire. Miller's publishing house was also attacked. A group of people tried to set the building on fire, but the fire was quickly extinguished. Despite the threats, work on the book continued. Morgan was determined to see it through, perhaps hoping for the financial success of the publication. In his rare public appearances, he stated that he was acting out of patriotic motives, wishing to expose an organization that posed a threat to America's Republican values. By September 1826, the manuscript of Illustrations of Masonry was almost ready for print. It was then that events occurred that turned a local conflict into a national scandal and forever changed the fate of American Freemasonry. On September 12, 1826, an event occurred that overturned the fate not only of one man, but of an entire movement in America. That evening, a carriage drove up to the Genesee County Jail. A man alighted from it, introducing himself as the sheriff of a neighboring county. He presented a warrant for the arrest of William Morgan on charges of theft and demanded the prisoner be handed over. Despite the late hour, the jailer agreed. Morgan was led from his cell and placed in the carriage. This was William Morgan's last reliably known public appearance. The man who dared to challenge a powerful organization vanished into the night, leaving behind only an unfinished book and many unanswered questions. Morgan's wife, Lucinda, alarmed by her husband's disappearance, raised the alarm. It soon became clear that the so-called sheriff had no official authority, and the warrant he presented was a forgery. A search began, which quickly uncovered a chain of events pointing to a meticulously planned abduction. Witnesses reported a closed carriage moving towards Canandaigua, then to Rochester, and further to Fort Niagara on the Canadian border. At each stage of this journey, the involvement of prominent Masons was traced. An investigation conducted by New York State authorities established that Morgan was held in the powder magazine of Fort Niagara for several days. What happened next remains a matter of dispute. According to the most common version, a group of Masons took Morgan by boat to the middle of Lake Ontario and drowned him, tying heavy stones to his body. Other sources claim that he was transported to Canada, where he was either executed or received a significant sum of money and new documents to start a new life in another country. Some Masons later spread rumors that Morgan had been seen in various parts of the world, from Smyrna in the Ottoman Empire to the Caribbean islands. However, no reliable evidence of his survival exists. During the investigation, authorities arrested several people involved in the abduction. 4 Masons were found guilty and sentenced to various terms of imprisonment, from 2 to 28 months. However, no one was charged with murder due to the absence of a body and direct evidence. It is noteworthy that among those arrested were highly respected citizens: a sheriff, a member of the state legislature, and other representatives of the local elite. This confirmed public fears regarding Masonic influence on all branches of government. In the spring of 1827, the body of an unknown man was discovered on the shore of Lake Ontario. Many, including Morgan's widow, identified him as the missing exposer. However, another woman later claimed that it was the body of her husband, a missing fisherman. The trial on this matter ended in favor of the second version, although many contemporaries and historians considered this decision to be the result of Masonic pressure on the court. Morgan's book, Illustrations of Masonry, was nevertheless published by David Miller in October 1826 and became a bestseller. It revealed the rituals of the first 3 degrees of Masonry, including oaths that many readers found incompatible with civic loyalty. Particular attention was drawn to descriptions of the brutal punishments allegedly inflicted upon traitors of Masonic secrets, from tearing out the tongue to dismembering the body. The disappearance of William Morgan was just the beginning of a series of mysterious events. Soon after his vanishing, people who possessed information about the case began to disappear or die under strange circumstances. These incidents, initially perceived as tragic coincidences, gradually formed a disturbing picture, suggesting a systematic purging of witnesses. One of the first victims was Timothy Monroe, a carter who transported Morgan part of the way to Fort Niagara. 3 months after Morgan's disappearance, he was found dead on a country road. The official cause of death was an accidental fall from a horse. However, witnesses noted strange circumstances: the absence of visible injuries and rope marks on his wrists, which authorities explained as the usual practice of tying bodies during transport. The next enigmatic figure in this story was Richard Howard, a stonemason from Buffalo who, according to some testimonies, boasted of his involvement in Morgan's elimination. In March 1827, when authorities became interested in him, Howard suddenly left the city. Later, Masonic sources spread information about his death in Boston, but his body was never found. and independent investigations could not confirm the very fact of his existence. Particularly alarming was the fate of Solomon Southwick, an anti-Masonic newspaper publisher who actively investigated Morgan's case. After a series of threats against him, unknown individuals attacked his printing house. Southwick himself survived 2 assassination attempts and then suddenly died from a heart attack. The doctor who conducted the examination noted unusual symptoms resembling poisoning, but the official conclusion indicated a heart attack. The story of John Whitney, one of the suspects in Morgan's abduction, who agreed to cooperate with the investigation, is also noteworthy. On the eve of important testimony, he was found dead in his cell. The prison doctor declared death from natural causes, although just a day earlier, Whitney had not complained of any health issues. Samuel Barber, a farmer who claimed to have seen a group of people transporting a bound man on the night of Morgan's disappearance, died in a mysterious fire at his home along with his wife and children. The investigation pointed to a faulty stove, but neighbors noted the strange behavior of unknown individuals seen nearby on the eve of the tragedy. The fate of William Miller, the assistant publisher of Morgan's book, caused particular resonance. After the successful publication of Illustrations of Masonry, he continued his anti-Masonic activities, collecting evidence of mysterious disappearances. In 1828, Miller traveled to a neighboring town to meet a potential witness and disappeared without a trace. Searches yielded no results, and the local sheriff, known for his affiliation with a Masonic lodge, quickly closed the case due to lack of evidence. The systematic nature of these disappearances and deaths is underscored by their temporal and geographical correlation with key moments in the investigation of Morgan's case. Each time new witnesses or evidence emerged, someone involved in the case disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. This pattern did not escape public attention and gave rise to a wave of rumors about a Masonic mafia, controlling justice and eliminating undesirable individuals. The disappearance of William Morgan and the subsequent mysterious deaths of witnesses shook American society, unleashing an unprecedented wave of anti-Masonic sentiment. This movement, which began as a local protest in western New York, within a few years transformed into a powerful political force of national scale, forever changing the American political landscape. By 1828, anti-Masonic committees had emerged in virtually all states of the eastern seaboard. They organized rallies, published newspapers, and distributed pamphlets exposing the alleged crimes of the Masons. The public, shocked by Morgan's story, demanded radical measures against the secret society, which, in their view, had placed itself above the law. The culmination of this movement was the creation of the first third party in American history, the Anti-Masonic Party. Its formal founding took place in September 1830 in Philadelphia, where delegates from 11 states gathered for the first National Anti-Masonic Convention. The party put forth a simple but effective platform. Freemasonry is incompatible with Republican values and poses a threat to free institutions. Anti-Masons argued that secret oaths placed lodge members in a privileged position and created a state within a state. The movement quickly gained popularity, especially among the Protestant middle class, farmers, and artisans. Many religious leaders supported it, seeing Freemasonry as a form of pagan cult. The success of the anti-Masons exceeded all expectations. In the 1832 elections, their candidate William Wirt received 7 electoral votes and placed third in the presidential race. In some states, particularly Vermont and Pennsylvania, anti-Masons achieved significant representation in legislatures and even elected several congressmen. Under public pressure, many Masonic lodges were forced to close. Thousands of Masons publicly renounced their oaths. The number of active lodges in America decreased from 2,000 in 1826 to fewer than 500 by the mid-1830s. In some states, laws were passed prohibiting the taking of oaths not sanctioned by the state. The political influence of the anti-Masonic movement extended far beyond the fight against a specific organization. It transformed the very nature of American politics, introducing new methods of political mobilization and agitation. Anti-Masons were the first to hold open party conventions for nominating candidates, which later became standard practice. They actively utilized the mass press and created an extensive network of local committees, engaging broad segments of the population in politics. Secret societies have always balanced on the fine line between myth and reality. Comparing the activities of the Order of the Germanen and American Masonic lodges, we find striking parallels. Despite their fundamental differences, both brotherhoods created their own mythology, surrounded themselves with an aura of secrecy, and claimed to possess special knowledge. However, if Masons declared adherence to the ideals of equality and brotherhood of all people, the Germanen built their ideology on the principle of racial superiority and exclusivity. It is interesting that both societies became objects of conspiracy theories, which often exaggerated their real influence. Masons were accused of seeking to establish world domination, while the Order of the Germanen truly contributed to the rise to power of a regime with global ambitions. William Morgan's case shows how a secret society can cross the boundaries of law to protect its secrets, and the history of the Germanen demonstrates how esoteric ideas can transform into state ideology with catastrophic consequences. It is symbolic that Freemasonry survived the anti-Masonic movement, albeit in a weakened form. By the mid-19th century, American lodges began to gradually recover, adapting to new social realities and becoming more transparent. The ideas of the Order of the Germanen, it seemed, died with the Third Reich, but their echoes continue to resonate in contemporary neo-Nazi and ultra-right movements. The role of secret societies in shaping historical processes remains a subject of discussion. Undoubtedly, they served as incubators of ideas that then permeated mass consciousness. They created networks of influence, uniting people with similar views and ambitions. However, their real impact on the course of history is often exaggerated by both apologists and critics. Today, in an era of information openness, secret societies have lost their former influence, but have not disappeared completely. They have transformed, taking new forms, from closed clubs of the world elite to virtual communities with their own codes and rituals. Studying their history helps us better understand the mechanisms of group identity formation, the spread of ideologies, and the manipulation of mass consciousness. Ultimately, both the Order of the Germanen and the Masonic lodges of Morgan's time demonstrate the danger posed by closed organizations that place their interests above the law and universal human values. They remind us of the fragility of democratic institutions in the face of secret conspiracies, and how easily esoteric ideas can turn into tools of political extremism.